The new Alien vs. Predator crossover isn't a rumor. It is being built right now, piece by piece, across multiple projects, and the people steering both franchises are doing it deliberately, carefully, and with one eye firmly on what happened the last time somebody tried this. So let's actually map out where everything stands, because it's more developed than most people realize. First, you need to understand just how strong a position both franchises are in right now, because none of this conversation would be happening if they were struggling. On the Alien side, Romulus in 2024 pulled in around 350 million worldwide on an 80 million budget. Director Fede Alvarez stripped the concept back to its roots, a group of people, a derelict ship, a xenomorph, and it worked beautifully. Then Alien Earth dropped on FX and Hulu in August, the first ever Alien series, created by Noah Hawley. Set in 2021, 2 years before the original 1979 film, it follows a hybrid human-AI consciousness named Wendy after a Weyland-Yutani research vessel crashes into a rival corporation city and unleashes something nobody was prepared for. The show pulled more than 9 million views in its first 6 days globally, got renewed for a second season by November, and critics called it the best Alien installment since Aliens in 1986. On the Predator side, the turnaround has been even more dramatic. Dan Trachtenberg came in with Prey in 2022, sent a Comanche warrior against a Predator in 1719, and scored a 94% on Rotten Tomatoes, better than the original 1987 film. The animated anthology Killer of Killers hit Hulu in June 2025 and landed a 95% critic score. And then Predator Badlands became the highest grossing Predator film in franchise history. Variety called it the strongest Predator entry since the original. And on Hulu, after its theatrical run, it became the platform's biggest movie debut in 4 years, pulling nearly 11 million streams in 5 days. Both franchises are on the best runs of their respective lives. Disney owns both, and everyone involved knows exactly where this is heading. Now back to Badlands, because that Weyland-Yutani android detail is the most significant development in the crossover conversation to date. Thea, Elle Fanning's character, isn't a cameo or a fan service nod. She's the co-lead of the entire film. The movie is built around the partnership between Dek, an exiled young Yautja trying to reclaim his honor on a hostile alien planet, and Thea, a damaged Weyland-Yutani synth. Producer Ben Rosenblatt explained the logic behind it. They needed a humanoid character who wasn't human, because Dek is supposed to be the protagonist, and a human co-lead would have pulled all the audience identification away from the Yautja. So Dan Trachtenberg asked who makes robots in this universe. Weyland-Yutani makes robots. Story logic pulled the alien universe in naturally. And critically, there are no xenomorphs in Badlands. No facehuggers, no chest bursters, just the corporation, which, if you know what Weyland-Yutani is and what they want, is somehow more threatening than showing the creature outright. This is the philosophy behind how this crossover is being constructed, and it's the complete opposite of what happened in 2004. Instead, they're letting the worlds drift toward each other through shared corporate entities, shared timelines, and shared story logic. And the timeline actually lines up. Badlands is set in the far future on another planet. Alien Earth takes place in 2021 on Earth. Weyland-Yutani is central to both. The version of that company in Alien Earth is still ruthless and still obsessed with acquiring alien biology at any cost. If at some point they pick up intel about a species of apex hunters operating in deep space, the Yautja, that's not a creative stretch. That's a natural story progression. The groundwork is already there. The first person to officially put a crossover on the record was Steve Asbell, president of 20th Century Studios, who told The Hollywood Reporter that an Alien vs. Predator project had been discussed internally, but he was very specific about what it would not be. It wouldn't carry that title, at least not obviously. It wouldn't resemble the 2004 or 2007 films in any meaningful way. The idea, as he laid it out, was that if they ever did it, the crossover would grow out of the characters and storylines they were already building. People audiences had genuinely come to care about, and those worlds would combine naturally rather than being forced together. He made clear they weren't going to rush it. Then there's Fede Alvarez, who has been openly and enthusiastically campaigning for this thing. He said publicly that he already has a real concept, not just a vague idea, but actual visual thinking done on it. And his pitch is genuinely wild. He wants the crossover to be a total secret going in, not just subtle marketing, a full deception. You release it as a standalone Predator movie. The marketing looks exactly like another Yautja hunt on a distant planet. The audience sits down expecting that, and then, midway through, a Weyland-Yutani vessel arrives somewhere. The doors open, something moves in the dark. You hear that chittering, and you realize the xenomorphs are there. Alvarez described it as wanting the audience to be watching what they think is a Predator movie, and then the Yautja lands somewhere new, and there are creatures, and the realization hits, those are xenomorphs. Or you flip it. What looks like an alien movie, something moving in the shadows that isn't a xenomorph, a shimmer in the air, that clicking sound, and the understanding that there is a predator in there. He said either version of that moment would wreck him in the best possible way. And honestly, that kind of gut punch reveal hasn't been executed at scale in a long time. Asbel, for what it's worth, went on record saying he's supportive of exactly that approach. Alvarez also floated a co-direction structure, himself for the alien half, Trachtenberg for the predator half, modeled on what Tarantino and Rodriguez did with From Dusk Till Dawn, where one director handles one section of the film and the other takes over. On paper, that sounds like a recipe for tonal disaster. In practice, given that both directors have proven they genuinely understand their respective creatures and aren't interested in making bad movies, it's at least an interesting experiment worth considering. Whether it's actually viable is another question. Dan Trachtenberg has been more measured about all of this. His philosophy throughout Badlands was to take an element from one franchise and fuse it with the other rather than forcing a full collision, and he said he thought that restraint was actually more exciting than a straight versus movie. He's clearly building towards something, but he's not in a rush to get there. That caution is probably the right instinct. The one voice pumping the brakes is Noah Hawley, the Alien Earth showrunner, who said that he has no current plans to bring a Predator crossover into his show, and that's completely fine. His series has its own rich mythology to develop, its own corporate power struggles, its own hybrid human storylines that are far from exhausted. Rushing the Yautja into Alien Earth before it's ready would be a mistake. The fact that Weyland-Yutani is already deeply embedded in both Alien Earth and Badlands is enough shared connective tissue for now. Which brings us to the history, because you cannot have this conversation without acknowledging what went wrong before. The 2004 Alien vs. Predator had, on paper, everything it needed to be spectacular. Two of the most iconic science fiction creatures ever put on screen, a major studio production, a concept that had already proven itself in comics and video games for 15 years, and it was a PG-13 film set in Antarctica, with a plot about a hidden predator training ground beneath the ice that felt designed by a committee terrified of offending anyone. The sequel in 2007 overcorrected, brutal and mean, but incoherent and ugly in a way that felt punishing. Both films treated their source material like merchandise, both failed critically, and the concept of a crossover became associated with embarrassment for years afterward, with both franchises spending the next decade actively distancing themselves from that period. What's different now is the intentionality and the track record. Prey proved that a Predator movie can be genuinely great. Romulus proved the same for Alien. Badlands proved the Predator universe can sustain a full shared world narrative without losing itself. These are not desperate cash grab projects. They are well-crafted, well-received pieces of work by filmmakers who clearly care. And that foundation is what makes a real Alien vs. Predator finally feel possible, rather than just inevitable. There's also a fan theory gaining real traction that Deck could be the character who anchors whatever crossover eventually happens. His arc is about proving himself as a hunter. His bond with a Weyland-Yutani synth already connects him to that universe at a personal level. If Weyland-Yutani's ongoing obsession with alien biology eventually leads them towards xenomorphs, which per franchise canon it always does, and Deck is somewhere in that vicinity when it happens, the collision point writes itself. That would make the crossover feel earned, because audiences already have a relationship with him. On top of that, Rosenblatt mentioned at the Badlands premiere that there had been genuine conversations about bringing Arnold Schwarzenegger back as Dutch, and that the interest existed on both sides. Nothing official, but the fact that it was said out loud publicly signals that Trachtenberg is thinking about the full shape of this universe across multiple films, not just one entry at a time. Disney isn't going to leave money on the table, and right now there is no bigger potential box office event in science fiction than a properly made, R-rated, creatively serious Alien vs. Predator film, one that treats both creatures with the same respect that Prey and Romulus showed their respective monsters. Both franchises are healthy, both creative teams are talking. The shared corporate thread is already woven into the current canon. Asbel has confirmed the conversation is happening at the studio level. Alvarez has a concept and is actively lobbying for it. Trachtenberg is building toward it slowly and deliberately, project by project. The question was never really if, it's always been how, and more specifically, how do you make sure you don't repeat 2004? Based on everything that's happened since Prey, it looks like the people in charge actually understand the answer. And when the moment comes, whether it's Alvarez's secret drop version or something else entirely, it's going to feel nothing like what came before.